Hello, friends, and welcome into Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast, wide receiver ranks for Week 15, your fantasy football playoffs, as long as you are sane and ending in Week 17. Don't do the Week 18 thing, please, unless I guess if you're doing the double matchups. But we're going to be talking about wide receiver ranks, courtesy of Fantasy Pros, and where we're ranking these guys for a very, very important playoff run. Big decisions to make, big Thursday night football game, all of it's there. And of course, we've got the great Pat Fitzmaurice, Scott Pianowski. I'm Chris Welsh. We are ready to jump into these wide receiver ranks, though I will ask you, as a setup to later in the show, Fitz, will Debo be ranked above Jauan Jennings again this week?
He will not. That was
Excellent.
a grievous error on my part last week. I greatly regret it. I apologize profusely to anyone.
It's okay.
On Debo Samuel.
Though they are setting everybody up. Purdy, I got to get him the ball more. George Kittle, Debo's going to have that big game. It's coming. They're trying to set us up.
Squeaky wheel game.
Fool me once. You know the rest of the drill. And I think, Scott, you're with me on this one. No, we already had a Devo conversation in the RB ranks here. Wide receivers, if you gentlemen are ready to get into this, let's roll. The big board. We get to see Jamar Chase at number one. Boy, has Jamar Chase been just a fantastic call on the year. And I got dicey the last couple of years about Jamar Chase and just being like, he's definitively just number one. It's just such a good call by all you guys that were in on Jamar Chase, especially shout out to the guys like Erickson, who went number one overall last year and then came back to it this year. I don't know if that's what you're about to say, Fitz.
Yep. Erickson had him number one. He was Erickson's 101 all along, like as far back as like last February. I mean,
yeah. Well, and like I said,
call.
Missing it last year and then coming back and just, standing on business like he did. So shout out to Erickson for that and the crew as Jamar Chase goes nuts. Back to the ranks, though. Jamar Chase at number one for this week. Nico Collins, Puka Nacua, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's your top five. Tyreek Hill, A.J. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, Mike Evans, Terry McLaurin, Cortland Sutton, and Cooper Kupp. 2 Rams going up against the Niners in the top 12. These are all starts. These are all fantastic plays, but let's talk about one thing. A wide receiver that you guys have higher than consensus on the ECR is Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin comes in at wide receiver 10 this week, going up against New Orleans, which I will note is the worst matchup rating of the top 12, according to Fantasy Pros. We have the 5-star rating system, just as an easy visual for you guys. The worst visual rating, well, I guess Jamar Chase also has a 2-star, but Jamar Chase. But Terry McLaurin with a 2-star matchup rating, but both of you guys are higher. Scott is at 8, but Fitzy, you're at 6, so let's kick it and start with you. You've got Terry McLaurin at wide receiver 6 this week. You are starting him over, I'm guessing, I'm not looking at your rank, but the CeeDee Lambs, the Mike Evans, the A.J. Browns of the world. So talk to us about Terry McLaurin.
Yeah, I disagree with the matchup rating. I think the Saints are a good matchup. They don't have a cornerback who concerns me at all. I mean, like, it's just not a good group of cornerbacks in New Orleans. So don't fear the matchup. And it is amazing how productive Terry McLaurin has been this season, considering that he has had double-digit targets exactly once this season. And here's how he's done it. He's averaging a career best 10.9 yards per target and has already scored a career high 9 touchdowns. And, McLaurin was on a heater before the Commanders had their week 14 bye. He had 5 catches, 102 yards and a touchdown against the Cowboys in week 12. Then 8 catches, 73 yards, 2 touchdowns against the Titans in week 13. Ride the hot hand and keep going with McLaurin.
Scott, you are on the high rank of Terry McLaurin here. We did something on the prediction show. We were talking about big play. I had a wide receiver who I thought was going to have a big, like 50-yard plus touchdown this year. And then Ryan Wormley brought up a handful of players. It was like, 5 players that had 4 or more 50-plus yard plays this season. And Terry McLaurin was one of those because he's also just been a big, deep play option as Jaden McDaniels has shown off just some really good accuracy and getting him the ball, though we didn't see volume early on. That seems to have turned where he's now getting a lot more volume. So a very aggressive wide receiver 8 rank this week. Again, we're poking here. It's not like, you're going to go and really sit the Suttons or the A.J. Browns of the world and stuff like that. But Terry McLaurin, if you got him, you are very, very high in a must-start range.
Yeah, always been one of my favorite players. Just nice to see him finally getting a plus quarterback to work with. I do wish the volume were a little bit better. He only has 1 game with double-digit targets, where I feel like he should be getting those games, every other week or something like that. But the consistency, right? What is it? 4, 5, 7 of the last 8 games, he's been in the top 20. He was wide receiver 7, wide receiver 2, and half point PPR scoring before that bye week. And, as far as the points allowed stuff, I mean, New Orleans has allowed the 9th most points to fantasy wide receivers. Now, some people might say, well, so what? All I care about is outliers. Tell me who's really, really horrible. Tell me who's really, really good. So if you want to just lump in New Orleans to the anonymous middle, that's fine with me too. And remember, they traded their best cornerback in the middle of the season to Washington. There's nothing to fear in this matchup. And when they do make downfield plays, it's usually McLaurin on the other end. He'll probably have to cut his score on 7 to 9 targets because they just don't pepper him off the bus. It's not the way they're constituted, but I can give you stats right now. He's going to have 6 catches, 82 yards, and a touchdown, and that's going to taste pretty good in week 15.
I'm going to take that bad boy. All right, let me ask you one off-sheet question. If you had to pick one wide receiver on here that is going to fail to come close to their rank, and I know it's tough because these are the wide receiver ones, but if you had a question about the production, a question about the player being able to come back with the general vicinity of where they are ranked in these wide receiver ones, who would you pick? And Scott, we'll start with you again. If you're looking, Chase Collins, Puka, Jefferson, St. Brown, Tyreek, AJ Brown, Lamb, Evans, McLaurin, Sutton, Kupp, who gives that little tingle in the back where you're a little bit nervous about?
Man, I love Amon-Ra St. Brown, but you can't ignore that this is one of the run heaviest teams in the league. He's been outside the top 30 in 3 straight starts. Tim Patrick is now just a mouth to feed. I mean, he's not in front of St. Brown in the pecking order, but he's just another guy for them to target. We know they want to run the ball. We know that they're just not, they were a carnival, Detroit was in previous seasons, right? Now it's a team, they play bully ball. They control the game with the line of scrimmage. They have 2 dominant running backs.
Laporta's getting more involved too, by the way, just to throw out finally.
For sure. Yeah. So St. Brown, who was just a target off the bus guy, is now, I talked about McLaurin having to do it with maybe modest volume. That's kind of who St. Brown is. Now, for a while, he was also getting a touchdown every week. He hasn't scored in the last 3 weeks. I know touchdowns can be a little bit hit or miss, but St. Brown will probably have a good game, but you're going to have to do it with 7 or 8 targets, where you look at some of these other guys. I mean, we know Nakua already has 12 targets. We know Nico Collins, how important he is to their offense in Houston. What a fun thing they got cooking in Minnesota, where Justin Jefferson is a star. And I think people are finally remembering that Jordan Addison won the Blitnikoff too. He was also a first-round pick. The Vikings, man, I wonder if they run it back next year with Sam Darnold. They'll have to sign him. I mean, I just want more of this. I would follow Kevin O'Connell into a burning building. I still have St. Brown in my top 5. And even if I move him down, it won't be outside the top 10. But I think we have to reevaluate what's plausible for his volume projection.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to set you guys up to be like, this guy will stink, but it's like, who's the guy that makes you squirm a little bit when you look at this top 12? Fitz, the question thrown to you. We got Amon-Ra for Scott. Who say you?
Yeah, Amon-Ra was a really good call. I think he's been a little bit overranked lately, but I'm going to say Cooper Kupp, just because Puka Nacua has become such a monster, and we were expressing our admiration for him before we turned on the mics. And it's just, I can't wait to draft Puka in the back half of the first round in 2025 drafts, because I know a lot of people are going to be unfairly fading him just because the time he missed is going to diminish the overall season-long stats for him. But just remember how good this is looking right now for Puka Nacua. Fantastic route runner, great after the catch, amazing at the catch point, makes acrobatic catches. He does it all. And, Cooper Kupp is the sidekick right now.
Kupp sometimes almost plays like a tight end role too, in how he's not going deep. It's just, 12 little yard outs and safety net, second read. It's funny that you did that, because that was the guy that made me think of the question when I was looking at this. Is if someone was going to, CeeDee Lamb might have been an obvious answer too. So glad to see you guys both didn't do that. Let's talk about wide receiver 2s, but first let's talk about Skylight Frames. Maybe gift giving isn't your love language. You overthink it and wind up with something disappointing or nothing at all. Are you buying for someone who has everything or just seems unpleasable? Are you tired of wasting money on useless clutter that no one really needs? Well, we've got the perfect gift for you, Skylight Frame. It's a digital touchscreen photo frame your whole family will love. You can upload thousands of photos with your phone and watch them appear in seconds with Skylight Frames. It's so easy to use. Set up Takes less than 60 seconds. I actually have one downstairs. There's an email address you send them all out to. It's seamless sharing, and you can invite friends and family to easily share photos via the free Skylight mobile app. All they've got to do is upload to your frame. It's incredible. Add new photos straight from your phone from anywhere. It only takes a tap on your phone to send new photos to the frame across the country. It's the fastest, easiest way to keep loved ones in the loop. They'll feel so much more connected to you. And now, as a special limited time offer for our listeners, get $20 off your purchase of a Skylight Frame when you go to skylightframe.com/fantasy. That's skylightframe.com/fantasy. Get $20 off your purchase now at skylightframe.com/fantasy. Wide receiver.
What a great company. What a great company name, too. I've always wanted a Skylight.
I have them. They're amazing. Wide receiver 2s, wide receiver 13 through 24. We start off with Mr. T. Higgins. We've got Drake London, Devontae Adams, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Jauan Jennings at 17, Jerry Jeudy, Garrett Wilson, Calvin Ridley. There's your top 20. We've got Malik Neighbors, Zay Flowers, DK Metcalf, and Lad McConkey. That's your top 24. I did not put this. This was Fitz. Fitz controls some of the narrative of what we talk about. So I want everyone to know when I say Jauan Jennings, this was not my fault. ECR 17. I was very defensive of him last week. Did not care about X receiver with the Bears. Just said, watch what Jauan Jennings is going to do. Bam. Fitzy, you're lower than ECR, but you're still in a good spot. But Scott, you are the high man. So let's actually first start with Scott here. You've got him at 16. You're a little bit higher than consensus. I'm a little bit higher than both of you. So go and check out the ranks if you want to see it. But talk to us about Jauan Jennings, Scott, because like Deebo Samuel is cooked. Maybe he will have one of these games like he's getting set up for the team, but it doesn't matter. That's not the point. Even if he does do it, it doesn't diminish or take away that Jauan Jennings is the first read. And that was something I kept placing 3 weeks prior to last week. 35% first read percentage, 40% of the air yard share, and he was working out of the slot. They are working to get him the ball because he is the playmaker for this team.
Right. Yeah, I would argue that he showed signature significance in that first breakout game against the Rams, that 11-175-3 detonation. And you can see how much Brock Purdy trusts him. He'll throw the ball when Jennings doesn't have a lot of separations. They've obviously run a lot of reps together, and they have a good thing going. And they can I know the squeaky wheel narrative, and Deebo's like, hey, I'm here. I'm just not getting the ball. So maybe they'll steer to that a little bit. But the Niners need to win out. They can't mess around with who's getting what. They need to lean into their best players. And right now, their best receiver is Jennings. I mean, if you give him a pass for that snow game in Buffalo, where really none of the Niners showed up, I mean, he's just smashing every week. He's off a wide receiver 5 performance last week, and he's almost never outside the top 20. I think they're going to keep pressing an easy button. He can win outside. He's getting a ton of slot reps, as you talked about, and those first target reads it's a really key stat that we've uncovered the last few years in data mining, that, we want the guys who the play was designed for. And those plays are designed for Jauan Jennings right now. I do think they'll try to get Deebo involved. Maybe that means Deebo has one of those games where he gets 3 or 4 at 5 carries. San Francisco has some injuries in the backfield, so that might make sense too. But I'll give you Jauan Jennings' stats. He's got 7 catches, 91 yards, and a touchdown. Take it to the bank.
Yeah. And, throwing in, I kind of agree. I wouldn't be surprised if Deebo does do something. They gave him 5 carries last week, so his over rushing marker hit. I do not believe Agrendo will play. That puts Patrick, Taylor, Avanaconda, and probably Deebo playing out of the backfield. So he may still get his touches, but we do know, as you mentioned, Jauan Jennings lit up this team before. So Fitzy, you've got him at 20. That's a solid wide receiver 2 this week. Let's get your take on Jauan Jennings.
Well, first, you might have forgotten about the great Keyshawn Vaughn in that backfield. So it's interesting, Welsh. You and I have done 2 starts at live streams together on Sunday mornings this year. I wasn't scheduled to be on any with you this year, but a couple of times I've pinch hit for Tom Strachan, our good mutual friend. Those 2 weeks, you were like over the moon excited about 2 different players. The first week, it was Bucky Irving. And Bucky went out and had either 2 or 3 touchdowns and almost 200 yards of offense that week. Last week, it was Jauan Jennings, and Jauan Jennings had 2 touchdowns and almost 100 yards. So your track record of being over the moon with players on those Sunday starts at live streams has been pretty darn good when you've done those shows with me.
I guess when I'm overzealous, that's your point. So thank you for the compliment. I guess when you hear me get really overzealous about a guy, maybe there's a semi-positive, at least those 2 weeks.
Yeah, so no teasing this and telling people to go look at our rankings. Where do you have Jauan Jennings ranked this week?
Oh, I don't have my rank. I think I have him at 13 right now. 13, 12 or 13. I will say I'm not pounding the table. My table pounding tends to come from when I see like the whole industry is just fading and not as excited. Everyone's excited about Jauan Jennings. So I think the expectation is there. I don't know how to compartmentalize. He destroyed the Rams last time. And will the focus be, do not let Jauan Jennings do this again? I don't know where the balance falls in that. I just know there's a safety net of Jauan Jennings, but I'm not sitting here pounding the table to everyone that you guys are all low and you got to get in on him. I would not be shocked if Deebo Samuel is more involved in this game, especially with the team narrative out there, Fitzy.
At least the industry is finally ranking Jennings higher. I was pounding the table a couple of weeks ago saying, why isn't Jennings have a higher ECR than Deebo?
Yeah, that was my thing last week on the show, was that exact conversation.
And I was the guy you guys were pounding the table at. You guys were staring me in the face as you were pounding the table because I was the guy dramatically underranking Jauan Jennings. I'm too low on him at wide receiver 20. I'll admit that. I have to revise my ranking and move him up. You guys have sold me. I mean, Brandon Ayuk sustained his season-ending injury in week 7. Jennings missed week 7 and 8, and then the 49ers had a week 9 bye. Since week 10, Jauan Jennings is wide receiver 13 in half-point PPR fantasy points per game. And as Scott mentioned, that includes that Buffalo game where the passing games just weren't really working that day. So, he has been a stud. He's averaged 14.2 half-point PPR fantasy points per game over the last 4 weeks, and that's with the snow game.
I would argue, and I know this is later on the rank list, I don't know if it's in the script or not. I think the real problem isn't what to do with Jauan Jennings. If you have him, you're starting him and you got him off waivers, you got him as it's really hard to find an impactful receiver who's undrafted. That they do happen. I know we talked last year. You guys got Puka Nacua in the pentathlon the first week, which was a great hit. You did Welsh, but I think the big problem here is what do you do with Deebo Samuel?
Totally
right? Is he startable? Do you want your do you have the stomach to bench him for Adam Thielen or for Jacoby Myers, for Jalen Waddle, who's inconsistent every week, whatever is left of DeAndre Hopkins? I think Deebo is actually one of the hardest players to rank this
I think that's a great question. And he's in the next range, but I think since we're here, we should just talk about it because he's ECR 35 this week. And that's generous. That's just generous to how he's produced. But I think we all have that. There's this. It's like the opposite, the falling knife syndrome where it's like you don't want to catch the guy on the way down. There's almost this like we're waiting to catch. We know there's a week coming for Deebo. We just cannot figure it out. The players and the team they're trying to signal that it's going to be this week, but how he's performed in a week out basis, it's not close to you start Thielen or Deebo Samuel. You start Thielen. DeAndre Hopkins is ranked below him. I don't think so. By the way, all my texts with Derek Brown last night are incoming ladder for DeAndre Hopkins. So Deebo has not proven that range. So I think that is a great question. And Fitzy, when we throw that to you, what do you do with Deebo Samuel? Just since we're on this Niner conversation, because that is probably more of what's killing people than do I start Jauan Jennings? No, you guys all know, just start him. And, hopefully you're going to at worst get your 5 for 70, but Deebo Samuel, we know what the downside is. It's nothing.
I've got him ranked wide receiver 40 right now. I've got him behind behind Amari Cooper, who hasn't really clicked with the Bills, although he did have a season high, or at least Bills high, 14 targets last week. I've got him behind Devontae Smith, who's getting kneecapped by the lack of passing volume with the Eagles. I've got him just ahead of Keenan Allen. The thing is, you would expect that the chaos in the 49ers backfield and all these injuries would be like driving Deebo's value through the ceiling. And it just hasn't happened yet. It's not, there's something wrong with Deebo this year, it seems like. I mean, the way he was letting balls go through his hands, that game against the Packers, and I know it was like a cold night game in Green Bay, but this has just not been the Deebo we're accustomed to. And maybe what Scott was saying in our running back show about Deebo and the number change is the key to it. Going from 19 to 1 has just taken the magic away.
There is probably something coming, and I won't lie. As a Niner person, I bet Jauan Jennings, and then I feel like every week I sprinkle something on Debo. So I wouldn't be shocked if something comes in. My narrative last week probably didn't hold 100%, where I was like, he's going to be more involved in the rushing game because they're down another guy. He was a little bit, but like now there's another guy most likely. And if it's down to Patrick Taylor and Abanaconda and the great Keyshawn Vaughn, would Debo be more involved with all of this? Maybe there's a possibility, but it's tough. At best, he's a flex option or desperation wide receiver 3, but there's a lot of other guys that sit in there. All right, so that was the wide receiver 3 side of that with Debo.
Let me ask you for my own personal use. I'm considering, I'm not afraid to bench name players. Debo's a name player. He has not produced for a long time. Playoff game. I have a really good receiver room, so he's basically a flex for me already. Although if you play anybody Thursday, you should play them in the static position, leave your flexibility open. But the way my roster is constructed, the only player is a 14-team league, so it's a deep league. The only guy I could probably bench Debo for would be for Hunter Henry, and I'm thinking of doing it. How do you guys come by on a Debo versus Hunter Henry?
Me personally, I'm playing Debo because there's that little part of me that wonders and thinks if the 49ers are going to try to shove Debo in our face a little bit with all the public narrative. Hunter Henry isn't the type that I'm like, oh yeah, that's a clear cut. So I would go Debo.
I'm leaning there too, thinking that Debo, even this compromised version of him, still has more touchdown equity than Henry does. What do you say, Fitz?
Yeah, I still would go with Debo, even though I think Hunter Henry has averaged like a solid 11 PPR points with Drake May as the starter. Like he's been pretty steady and consistent, but man, you just wonder if like one more running back injury if Garendo in fact doesn't play, like if this does mean that we finally see Debo get like 8 or 9 carries.
Debo also reminds me of like when you see a baseball pitcher who's struggling and you live with it and you deal with it. And at the end of the season, he's like, oh yeah, my shoulder's been barking since like May 15th. Right. I wonder if we're going to hear about Debo having some cleanup surgery in January or February. It's going to be, okay, he played hurt and I salute that. And these guys are warriors. If I took one NFL hit, I'd probably never walk again. But he doesn't look like a guy who's healthy right now.
We'll hear some excuse. I can promise you that. All right. And a wide receiver that you guys you're in between, you're on the outside of the in-between ECR is DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf, ECR 23 on this list. Scott, you are the low man at 25. Fitz, you're the high guy at 19. He has kind of taken the backseat to JSN, looking like the number one here. And he's becoming a pretty constant question that people don't trust. Like the upside is kind of fading a little bit and the floor is fading as well. This is the tied for the worst matchup of the wide receiver 2s on the matchup grade against the Green Bay Packers for DK Metcalf. It's T. Higgins and him giving only 2-star rating. So Scott, let's start with you. You are the low guy at wide receiver 25. That's a wide receiver 3 for you for DK Metcalf this week.
Yeah, I mean, you said it well with JSN is basically taken over. I realize they play different roles, but JSN is the featured guy now. And I never thought that Geno Smith and DK Metcalf had the greatest connection. And they certainly don't have it working in the red zone because DK only has 1 touchdown in his last 8 games. Green Bay is secondary. I think can get after it. So Metcalf, I feel like he's got maybe a 25 or 30% chance at a touchdown. I don't feel like he's going to go over 100 yards. You probably have to play him. To me, it's as a wide receiver 3 now. And I'm about production. I'm about numbers, not names. I'm not going to be locked into what I thought Metcalf was before the season. Also, I don't think they can unsee what Charbonnet did last week. And maybe Charbonnet has more touchdown equity to offer around the goal line after that great game against Arizona. It's hard to trust DK in his current form. Also, just when you watch DK, you see him kind of his focus and his attention, and sometimes his composure can come in and out of games. I'm never surprised when he takes a personal foul, when he gets frustrated, when he throws his helmet, stuff like that. I don't know. I know the team's playing well right now. I think he's maybe a version of the AJ Brown story, where he's not getting along with Jalen Hurts. I wonder if maybe DK's frustrated and stewing, even though Seattle is on a 4-game winning streak. I do not play him proactively in week 15.
Fitzy, you are more positive on them, though. You've got him inside the top 20. So talk us through DK. Where do you have JSN too relative to that DK rank?
Oh, I mean, I've got JSN ranked wide receiver 13 and okay. DK 19. And like, enabling both guys to be in the top 20 is the fact that Tyler Lockett has completely disappeared from this offense. Like, he is a total non-factor now. It is a 2 wide receiver show. And I realize DK has gone 4 straight games without a touchdown and 4 straight games with 70 or fewer receiving yards. And this is, I guess, philosophically in direct opposition to what Scott was just saying. I still think DK is one of the 20 best wide receivers in the league. And maybe the emergence of JSN has hurt DK a little bit. But at the same time, with Lockett disappearing, I think there should be enough for him to continue to produce. I don't worry about this matchup at all with the Packers not having Jair Alexander. Like, there are no cornerbacks in this Green Bay roster, I say as a faithful Green Bay Packers fan, who would concern me if I had a receiver going against them. And please, if you're a DK Metcalf investor, you want to see Eric Stokes on DK Metcalf. You want that, trust me. I'm just going to continue to bet on a big, freakishly athletic wide receiver who has averaged 9 touchdowns and just under 1,100 yards a season, and has been pretty indestructible throughout his career. So, like, I just fundamentally still very much believe in DK Metcalf.
Why don't we call? I'm a caffeine guy. Why don't we call DK Metcalf decaf? Because he
Mm.
feels like decaf right now.
When he
This does not feel
struggles,
like full leaded.
decaf, yeah. Decaf, Metcalf, it works a little bit. You got to mess with it just a tiny bit, but then
Yeah, let's workshop it a little bit. Maybe offline. If somebody has hit us up on Blue Sky or on Twitter if you have a good idea for Metcalf. But anytime you're ready, DK, it's the fantasy playoffs. We need you, buddy.
There's probably like a really good meme or something people can put together. We're going to talk about wide receiver threes, but I want to remind you guys that you can still take advantage of a full month of free premium access on Betting Pros today. Go and download the app and use the code FPFREE. Maybe your fantasy season coming to a close, but you don't have to let the fun stop. You can go over to Betting Pros. And not only can you do it for free, by the way, and you could follow guys like Fitz and myself. You can see our bets. You can track a bunch of great stuff. You can track yourself. Even if you're not a bettor, you can just input bets and you can use some of the stuff to see how have you done, to see maybe what you want to do when you're ready to take that next step. But if you use a promo code FPFREE, you can unlock all of the premium features, same game parlay tools, prize pick tools. We've got a ton of great stuff like the prop bet analyzers and prop bet cheat sheets. You can get all of those tools to make your great picks today. FPFREE, full month of access. Download the Betting Pros app, iOS or Android. Do it today. Promo code FPFREE.
Never forget, okay, the week after you're eliminated, your team will do the dance of the recently eliminated. That's the week to bet all your players on props.
Yeah, you bet overs on all your players.
They will go crazy when they no longer can help you for fantasy.
Yeah, so that means Jaden Reed this week for everybody, by the way. It's a Jaden Reed week if you're playing that logic. All right, wide receivers 25 through 36. DJ Moore, Brian Thomas, Jacoby Myers, Jordan Addison at 28, Jaden Reed at 29. Jalen Waddle, Khalil Shakir, Marvin Harrison, Adam Thielen, Darnell Mooney, Debo, and DeAndre Hopkins of those players that we talked about. A couple interesting ones. Let's start with Jordan Addison, wide receiver 28 this week. Scott, you got him at 26. Fitz, you are lower. Addison went absolutely berserk mode last week. And Scott, you don't have him quite as a wide receiver too, but what are your thoughts on Addison and your trust for him this week?
Oh, it's really high. I want you to go online, you go on YouTube and look at his highlights last week. I mean, this is a guy I think we forget because Justin Jefferson is at times looks like the best receiver in football. That Jordan Addison was a first-round pick. He was a Biletnikoff winner in that one breakout season at Pittsburgh. He kind of lost his way a little bit at USC. He was hurt some of that. Look, Addison can be frustrating because some of his off-the-field issues at times, but he looked like a star in that game against Atlanta, and this is a very concentrated, a very tight target tree in Minnesota. Darnold's playing at a very high level. We like Kevin O'Connell. They don't throw to a third receiver. Hawkinson's involved, but not super involved. AJ Jones. Who am I thinking of? Aaron Jones. I wanted to call him AJ Jones. I wanted to conflate AJ Dillon and Aaron Jones. Nobody wants that. I know Green Bay Packer fan Fitz doesn't want that, but Jones will catch a few passes. He won't get in the way. This is a 2 receiver shop in Minnesota. It's a 1A, it's a 1B. Obviously, Jefferson is the Mary and Jordan Addison is the Rhoda for the 5 people who get that reference. But I cannot unsee how electric he looked, how he was winning 50-50 balls, how he was getting extra yardage, how he was winning in the slant areas. He looks like an electric guy to me who could be what we want maybe T. Higgins to be, right? Or what maybe Chad Ochocinco and TJ Houshmandzadeh were once upon a time, or, what we'd like Waddle and Hill to be in Miami with. It doesn't always work out that way. Jordan Addison to me is somebody you have to play the rest of the fantasy season.
Addison's floor seems to be getting really high, and he continues to keep producing, unlike earlier in the year. I had this debate, Fitz, with Bogman that about Addison and Jauan Jennings, and he is Addison over, which I was a little surprised about. But I think that also says like where some people are moving into this level of trust with how they're passing the ball. What say you on the Addison front? You got him lower. You have him outside of the top 30.
Yeah, and I'm glad Scott mentioned that great season that Jordan Addison had at Pitt, because like that was an eye-opening season. If you saw him play that year, you were never going to fade him merely because he was sharing targets with Justin Jefferson. Like you knew how good a player Jordan Addison was. Now, it's not to say Jefferson can't be a problem at times, and we've seen Jordan Addison be really unpredictable. Like he's had these couple of smash games, 133 yards and 3 touchdowns last week against the Falcons, 162 yards and a touchdown against the Bears in week 12. But Addison has also had 42 or fewer receiving yards in 5 of the 11 games he's played this season. So that's kind of the thing. And despite the good game he had against the Bears earlier, the Bears are certainly a tougher matchup than the Falcons, who, although Addison did make some spectacular plays last week, there were also some moments of just blooper reel coverage by the Falcons in that game, one of which resulted in one of those Addison touchdowns. So, yeah, I mean, he's a hard guy to peg. I guess I'm pretty much right in line with ECR, wide range of outcomes. And, Scott, I am old enough. I did get the Mary Tyler Moore reference, one of the great sitcoms of all time.
Mary Tyler Moore. I like it. Here's a debate for you. Adam Thielen, Marvin Harrison. And the reason I do this is because I know the answer. I know there's some dissent on this one. We talked about Thielen before. Like, I thought it was an interesting when you threw in Thielen versus Debo, because I don't think Thielen's even in that conversation. But it is very funny to see Marvin Harrison thrown into that because he is inconsistent. It's a Cardinals thing. It's part of the offense. It's Trey McBride is the number one, and Marvin Harrison, you hope, is the beneficiary of poor coverage in some space, but it's just nothing crazy. So I asked the question, Marvin Harrison versus Adam Thielen, and I will start with Pat Fitzmaurice. Who are you taking?
Yeah, I would request humbly that you refer to Adam Thielen as Ponce de Leon, because the 34-year-old Thielen is drinking deeply from the fountain of youth these days. 103 catches last year. So, like, he is Bryce Young's favorite security blanket and has been. And then over the last couple of weeks, he's just been fantastic. 17 of 21 targets he's caught for 201 yards and a touchdown over his last 2 games. So like he is on a heater. Going up against Dallas, a defense we don't really fear at all. I prefer him. And like, I hate that Marvin Harrison Jr.'s average depth of target this year is 13.4 yards. Like it seems like he is being so miscast as this vertical receiver for the Cardinals. And like, I'm not saying Harrison is on the same planet as Jamar Chase in terms of talent, but I just wish the Cardinals would use Harrison a little more in the way that the Bengals use Chase, where, yeah, like they attack downfield with Chase. Burrow will throw deep balls to Jamar Chase, but Jamar Chase's average depth of target is 9.4 yards, and they will dial up these easy completions where, like, here, Jamar Chase, here's a quick throw 2 yards away from the line of scrimmage. See what you can do after the catch. And a lot of times he'll run for 8 yards and pick up a first down. And like, I want more of that to Marvin Harrison. So it's just Harrison's target counts and his production has just been all over the place. I think Thielen is a safer bet for week 15.
Little did any of you think you'd be sitting Marvin Harrison for Adam Thielen this week, but maybe that's not 100% the case. Scott, same thing. Harrison versus Thielen.
Yeah, it's Thielen for me. Really encouraged by how well Bryce Young has played since the benching. And I mean, man, he handled the pressure really well in the Kansas City game. I thought he acquitted himself really well against the Philadelphia defense that's been playing great. And I love the point Pat made about where are the easy throws for Harrison. My colleague at Yahoo, Matt Harmon, would call them the layup targets, right? Why are they not scheming these layup targets? Not just to see what Harrison can do with the yak, but just to get him involved in the game, let him touch the ball a little bit, let him feel like he's on the field and in the game plan. I think they've done a poor job scheming him. I'm also not the biggest Kyler Murray fan in the world. So If you told me 2 months ago, you will believe in a receiver in the Carolina offense, and it won't because Andy Dalton's playing well, it could be because Bryce Young is playing well, I would say you're absolutely crazy. But here we are. We have to skate to where the puck is headed, not to where it's been. I believe in this Carolina offense. They're favored in this game. I think they're going to score 20-plus points, and I think Adam Thielen is going to have at least 80 yards. He's going to be the first read for Young as he's been during this run, and may we all age as gracefully as Adam Thielen in his age 34 season.
Plenty age 34. Plenty more questions that are out there. More than 36 wide receivers. Plenty of you guys are going to be starting in your 3 wide receiver multi-flex leagues or 2 wide receiver 2 flex leagues. So there's lots of questions. One way you can get those answered is go to fantasypros.com/rankings, and you can check out the rankings to get into part of those. The other way is to make sure to join us right here on our YouTube channel on Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern for the Start and Sit show. So you can come in, ask your specific question. Well, that is literally what we're designed to do. We're we're just pounding out questions. So make sure that you check it out 3 p.m. Eastern Thursday, youtube.com/fantasypros. If you're listening on the podcast, make sure you're subscribed, notified, so you don't miss any of it. That's Pat Fitzmaurice, Scott Pianowski. I'm Chris Welsh. Thank you guys for hanging out with us right here for the Week 15 wide receiver ranks. We'll talk to you next time right here on Fantasy Pros.